Hey all, it's David Ducker coming back at you, and today I'm going to be doing a video request. Somebody asked, can you describe your style? How do you do things? What do you call your style? Especially to help out like a new GM. I think I've done some videos for new GMs, but I haven't done one single video that compacts my whole style. So I'll try to do it really quick. I call myself prepare to improvise because I do a lot of prep before we get started, but after we get started I don't really have to do any prep between sessions, and most of it from that point is just improvised. So first of all, prepare, that's the prep. So I make first of all we've got to decide on the genre, on the world, the rule set, who we're going to have in as players, and what their team is going to be. If they're going to be pirates, if they're going to be naval officers, if they're going to be gladiators, if they're going to be mice escorting other mice through a rat-infested forest, whatever they're going to be. We got the team, we got the world, we got the genre, so if it's space opera, if it's pulp horror. So we decide all of that, and then I go through what is the general plot going to be? Is it going to be a mystery? Is it going to be a conflict? Is it going to be an exploration? Is it going to be an intrigue? Perhaps at the court of a king. So we decide on the story. And the way I decide on the story is in very broad terms, because I want the players to be able to impact that story to a huge degree. My favorite story seems to be a war, or we've got two sides that are going to clash. So I decide that the story is about a war, or some kind of clash or conflict. That's the easiest one, so we'll keep it as an example. So that's the preliminary prep. We've got the world, we've got the story, we've got the genre, we've got the players. They've formed a team. And then I do my more in-depth prep. So I take my two sides that are going to clash and I detail them out. Sub-factions, all of the NPCs involved. So let's go back to our last campaign. It was about rebels versus the Empire. So I went through and I made up the Empire. So we've got the government, the royal house, we've got the army, we've got the wizard's tower, we've got the temple, we've got the trade guilds. So we've got about 5 factions with them, and then and each faction has at least 2 NPCs, sometimes 15, but at least 2 for each sub faction. That way, if the lead guy gets killed, his apprentice takes over, or his lieutenant takes over, and the whole faction doesn't get killed. And then that new guy, the lieutenant, he will take over and bring in a lieutenant of his own. Because if a whole faction is just one guy, it's so much less interesting, and it can result in kind of a total party kill for your NPCs. You don't want that. And then on the other side, we do the same thing with the rebels. So they had the fleet, because they were kind of a nautical rebellion, pirates. They had an assassins guild on their side. They have foreign power aiding them. They also had some of the trade guilds on their side as well. So that was the rebel. Each of those and they had their own temple, a cult as well. So we had each of these sub-factions, and again, each has about at least 2 NPCs, sometimes as many as 15. So now we've got our 2 sides broadly outlined. We've got the people. So we're going to do kind of a political web. Who hates who in each group, and who trusts who in each group. So the temple and the wizard tower, they're both on the side of the Empire, but they don't like each other. And on the other side with the rebels, we've got Um, see, the Navy and the foreign allies, they're on the same side. They hate the Empire. They don't like each other, though. One wants to be independent. One wants to conquer everything. So we've got tension within each of these groups. Each of these groups has tension internally. And this will allow the PCs, hopefully, to leverage some sides into switching one way or the other. So now we've got, what did we say? We had 10 sub-factions, 2 major factions. Each one has 2 NPCs, so we've got at least 20 NPCs. And if I recall, we actually had about 50 when we started. So I could have just had 20, but we had about 50. And at that point, it's so well detailed, I can drop the PCs in. And they were members of a noble house, and they were related to the wizard's tower. He was part of their noble house. So I dropped them in. And that's the end of my prep and the beginning of my improvisation. So I kind of know that these factions are going to clash. And I've gone through each NPC and thought about, what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, what their personality is like, if the lieutenants are plotting against their boss, or if they like their boss. So we get that intrigue again. So the players went through and they started meeting people. They started getting a feel for the environment. And they started making allies and enemies. So, sometimes they make enemies and allies that are not what I would have thought of. I wouldn't say intended, because I don't intend anything to happen. I just drop them in and then I improv. So like they made allies of the temple and the Assassin's Guild. They were also allies with them. And they made allies with the Wizard's Tower. Made enemies with the pirates. Made enemies of the royal house, but allies of the army. So that all these, nebulous contacts, they made allies, but they also made enemies. And when it came down to this web disentangling to form the fists, they ended up turning the assassins onto their side, but the leader of the Wizard Tower, their uncle, ended up killed, and his lieutenant took over and switched the wizards to the other side because he was the enemy of the party. So, I never would have thought that the Wizard Tower would switch sides, or that the Assassin's Guild would switch sides the other way. But they did, because of the PCs and their actions. And for that matter, I didn't know the PCs would end up allied with the Empire. I thought they'd probably side with the rebels and say, we're going to overthrow the Pharaoh. We don't like him. He's corrupt. But because it's all realistic, it's all gray on gray, they could do whatever they want. They could piss off whoever they want. They can make friends with whoever they want. And they can affect that end game. And they can decide, which side they're going to be on for the end game. For that big battle. So they sided with the Pharaoh. They made some allies. They made some enemies. Caused some sides to switch. And, at a certain point when it became logical to do so, when enough people had been introduced that they really knew what was going on, that's when you have the first big clash and a big battle happens. So you get this action. Not that we didn't have action previous, but it was a lot of duels, fights in the street, and the occasional dungeon crawl, because all the sides are gathering their magical abilities. They're trying to get artifacts, trying to get secrets, trying to get gold and funding. Also, their uncle was very interested in ancient mystery. He thought a cataclysm was happening and needed to stop it. So, of course, the clues were in a dungeon. So we did have action in that first half, but then we had the major battle. Multi-session. It was like 4 sessions to fight through this battle. And we got to see, based largely on the PCs, who would win that battle. At the start, they were pretty equal. the PCs caused different groups to switch, and that might have made them unequal for that battle. So that's a huge edge the PCs could have given one side or the other. But then in the battle itself, the PCs have huge power to influence that based on their tactics, on their fighting, not just fighting ability, but perhaps magical ability as well. So we had the big battle, and then we did the aftermath of the big battle, and we kind of just continued that cycle, the aftermath, more politicking, more dungeon crawl, more duels, until it became logical for another battle, until one side won or the other side lost or whatever. But the key is to my whole style, I made everything first. I dropped the PCs in. After each session, I think about what they did and how that has a ripple effect over all the factions, all the NPCs. They just killed the high priest. The temple's not going to like that, but the wizard tower is going to love that. And the Assassin's Guild might be curious, because if anybody should have assassinated the high priest, it'll be the Assassin's Guild. So just think about how each individual will respond to the news that the PCs generate, until you're ready to start these clashes. So again, I follow the 3-act structure. The intro, then we have that first clash. And that's still kind of part of the intro. It's rising action. And once everyone is introed, we're trying to hit that climax as fast as we possibly can. So we want to keep momentum. We don't want to stagnate. We want the whole campaign to be as fast as possible. But it takes time to intro everyone. And it takes time for them all to clash with each other. So we still end up with a pretty long campaign, because we've got so many moving parts. And then we hit our big climax. If the war is over, remember the war, that was the story. So when the war is over, the story is over. We say the end, everyone narrates an epilogue, and it's all wrapped up in a nice, neat little bow, neat little package. So that's the way I go through. I prepare, we improvise their actions and the reactions of the NPCs. And when the story is over, after we hit our 3-act structure, then the campaign is over. And we prepare for another campaign, which could be a sequel to that first campaign. Some campaigns do set you up well to do a sequel, some don't. So that's my style in a nutshell. A lot of preparation and some long-term big picture planning, but session to session, all we do is react. And I call it prepare to improvise. So that's my style. I'd love a video response. I'd love questions. I'd love to know what you think of the style that I put forth today. Again, I tried to make it as brief as possible. I use an example. But I hope it's helpful. It's taken me a while to develop this style, and I found it very, very effective for me and my group, and the amount of role playing we like to do. It's a very low combat style in general. Not that it has to be, but the way we do it is. So let me know what you think, and everybody have a good day. Cheers.